Mike Craven does a hell of a job with what he does, covers for Dave Campbell's Texas Football Magazine, Texas Football Online, and he joins us on 365 Sports. Saw him, in fact, at the Texas High School Football Hall of Fame with Greg Tepper, a good friend of the show as well. Mike, in the end, you had that tour where you visited a lot of programs. I know the Circus Sports, as far as numbers and predictions and wins and losses, et cetera. We'll get to that too. Are there a couple of stories from your tour that perhaps either unique or surprising or that jumped out to you the most?
It's a great question. I think at A&M, that stands out to me. Mike Elko going into year two, just his belief in this football team, right? In the transfer portal era, you can go and improve at quarterback in the transfer portal. And Elko and Colin Klein, the offensive coordinator, clearly believe in Marcell Reed, putting a lot of eggs in that basket. They think the defense is going to be better. They think the pieces around the quarterback are better this year. Obviously, the offensive line is going to be really good. And so how A&M does depends on Marcell Reed. If he hits, I think the Aggies could be a college football playoff team. If he doesn't, they're going to be struggling to reach a bowl game with that schedule. So it just feels like the Aggies have huge variance. I think what's going to happen in SMU is going to be interesting. They spent a ton of money to make that roster viable to win in year one as a Power 4 program. They've had to replace most of the defense, all the skill position players, and I'm not sure the guys they brought in were as good as the guys who left. So what happens with SMU? And then obviously, the Big 12 schools are the Big 12 schools, and who knows what's going to happen. You mentioned the Circus Sports lines. I was shocked to see Houston and TCU have the same win projection at 6.5. So the state's going to be cool this year. There's a lot of returning quarterbacks, a lot of questions otherwise. And so, Arch Manning, obviously, there's a lot of storylines across the state.
A&M in particular has a really interesting schedule. They got UTSA and Utah State, and then it's like it's nothing but bangers until they get to Samford. Even Mississippi State, who they classically have not played well against, and Arkansas, who could, that's probably the biggest wild card. Maybe the SEC, if they really hit, they could upset some people or not. Is it really all on Marcell Reed, or do you think it's on that defense as well to be able to kind of, bounce back a little bit and help them when they were deficient a couple times towards the end of last year?
Yeah, the defense has to be better. We can go back and listen to Mike Elko's press conference after that Las Vegas Bowl. He was at a loss for how bad that secondary was, how bad that pass defense was at the end of the year. And remember, when he was a defensive coordinator at A&M, he left with the best secondary, the best pass defense in the country when he became Duke's head coach. So I just imagine that's going to get fixed. They did some stuff in the portal at edge rush and in the secondary. When I sat down with him in the spring, he talked about how defense doesn't get enough credit from how much it improves from year one to year two, because instead of thinking and figuring out what you're supposed to do, what your reads are, you just kind of read and react. You start playing faster. And so he's assuming that the defense is going to take the next step. So that's why I think so much is on Marcell Reed. When you see these preseason top 25s across the nation, you see A&M as high as 10 or 11, and then you see in some where they're not even ranked. And to me, it all comes down to your opinion of Marcell Reed and what he can do as a quarterback. He's going to be good in the run game. That running game is going to be really good. Reuben Owens, Le'Veon Moss, Amari Daniels, they're going to run the football. But if Marcell Reed can become just an above average passer, like a plus in the passing game, all of a sudden A&M goes from a 7-8 win expected team to maybe a 10 win expected team. And in the SEC, you go 10-2 and you're in, right? So it is a lot riding on Marcell Reed's shoulders. And again, they didn't go and try to find somebody in the portal to compete with them. And to me, that suggests that they really believe in him. They're putting everything on him, and we'll see if that works out.
Mike, I don't know how often you got to be around there during the Jimbo era, but I was just curious about how just different the vibes are under Elko as opposed to the previous regime, where it just felt like things were always at a breaking point at any moment. And there's obviously a lot of money flowing, and that hasn't changed. But is it while the expectations or pressure just as high, is it a little bit calmer in some ways? Is there any notable difference? How would you describe it, if at all?
I guess I would describe it as just like a more mature place now. I do think the way an athletic department runs, or at least the way a football program runs, dictates like on the personality of the head coach. And, Jimbo Fisher got a blank check and got a, fake national trophy right away. And I don't think he had to do or wanted to do a lot of things that he didn't want to do, right? Like if you're going to owe me $75 million to go away, like I'm going to do it the way I want to. And I think there was a little bit of chaos behind the scenes. There was a lot of different messaging and a lot of different messengers. I think Mike Elko has just kind of brought a professional approach in there, a more laid back approach. He allows kind of the people around him to do their job, I think, a little bit freer and with less pressure. And so who knows what it ends on the field, right? I mean, like he goes 8-4 last year. I think he's going to have to do better than that to stay A&M's coach in the long term. But I do think that he's provided a little bit of adulthood in that building and like more accountability. And the players talk about it all the time. It's just like how he brought some accountability, some discipline that place, obviously lacked there towards the end.
So the Circus Sports on the over-under on wins, and you did really well with this. I believe it was a year ago. So the Big 12, as you know, can be an absolute just like, I don't know, Rubik's Cube, if you want to use that, because every year there's 3 that are better than we think, a lot better than we think, and 2 or 3 that just fall, like last year, Utah and Oklahoma State. So there's 3 teams. They have 8.5 wins, which, of course, is tantalizing. Arizona State, K-State, and Texas Tech. Which of those 3 or any of those 3 would you buy or sell?
I'd probably sell Arizona State just from the idea of a regression to mean and just, maybe you don't win some of those coin flip games and you go 8-4, which is still a really good season, but you don't hit the over. I like Avery Johnson at Kansas State. Maybe I'm a little close to the trees here, but just what Texas Tech's done in the portal, and then you look at that schedule, especially the non-conference schedule, and it's hard to find more than 3 wins. Like 8-4 would be a disaster season in Lubbock. Like you're spending more than everybody else in the conference. You have your quarterback back. You get better in the trenches. Josh Kelly, Coy Aiken, or Caleb Douglas and Coy Aiken out there at wide receiver. Like Texas Tech should be a 9-3, 10-2 football team and right there to be in Arlington. Like I think Joey McGuire would say it would be a failure if they don't end up in the Big 12 championship game. So to me, I'm taking the over on Texas Tech just over a personnel standpoint. Like they did so well in the portal in a conference that everybody's pretty even talent-wise, like a little bit of a bump. I think that's what, served Colorado well last year. They had the 2 best players on the field at all times, and in a conference where everything's a 3-point line, like that can be enough. I think Tech is going to have the playmakers that other schools don't, and that's going to be enough in a league where everything's a coin flip.
Of the 4 teams that are at the bottom, 5.5 wins for Arizona, UCF, and 5 each for Oklahoma State and West Virginia. Which is most likely or more likely to get to a bowl game? Arizona, UCF, Oklahoma State, or West Virginia?
I guess I'm going to take Oklahoma State for like a non-scientific reason of it feels like every single time we think Mike Gundy's got a great team, they underachieve. And every single time we try to write off Mike Gundy and put them out to pasture, like they go 9-3 or 10-2 and make the Big 12 championship game. So a lot of those places you mentioned are new head coaches, and there's so much a boom and bust factor with that. It's hard to predict what will happen at UFC, what will happen at West Virginia. But Oklahoma State, like with that established culture, back against the wall, nobody believes in us. That typically is Mike Gundy's music, and maybe he's able to kind of pull it off one more time and go 7-5 and surprise everybody.
So, Mike, I think these win totals show us that even Vegas doesn't quite have full confidence in being able to just outright, lay the land out there when it comes to the Big 12. It's just it's so unpredictable. But you did mention one of their over-unders there at the top, and that was TCU at 6.5, which does seem like it's a bit low, given Josh Hoover's return, et cetera. Why do you think perhaps, or why do you believe maybe they're more in that area than a little bit higher up the list like some others?
I think in the Big 12, it can be a conference where people turn the page halfway through the season when a team's not very good. And I think TCU being 3-3 and how they lost to Utah and, how they lost to Houston and getting blown out against SMU, I think people just kind of stopped paying attention to what TCU was, figured that they won a couple of games and kind of moved on, didn't think about it. And they were really good at the end of the year. The only time they lost after they were 3-3 was that 3-point game at Baylor against a really good Baylor team. So TCU was one of the hotter teams of the year last year. I think Josh Hoover at quarterback, one of the more underrated players in the country. It sounds like Tennessee, made a push to get him out of Fort Worth. They're kind of the opposite of Texas Tech, where Texas Tech made a lot of splashes, 2 new coordinators, a ton of transfer portal. Sonny Dykes going into year 4 is betting on recruiting and development. Kendall Briles going into year 3 as the OC, Andy Avalos, year 2 as the defensive coordinator. They got a handful of guys from the portal, but more supplemental type players that are going to help at wide receiver in a few positions. Like, they're going in-house and they're betting on continuity in a college football world with a lot of turnover. I think that they could be a surprise team in the Big 12. I don't know if they have a year like they did in 22, obviously. But 6.5 feels really low. Now, Vegas, those casinos get bigger and nicer for a reason. They know what they're doing. Sometimes you walk into what you think is a easy bet and you lose the house. But TCU at 6.5 was 6.5 was the biggest shocker to me. I think that they win at least 8 games.
Mike, I'm a little surprised at West Virginia at 5 and UCF at 5.5, given that we know more about West Virginia's roster than we do about UCF's.
Yeah, I don't know what that's about, really, honestly. Like that what's going to happen outside the Big 12? Like, this time of year, especially for me, I am so nose deep in the magazine that, like, I know nothing outside of the 13 programs in the state, right? So, like, if you ask me who the starting quarterback at UCF was, I'd have to really think about it. So, what's going on there with that line? Like, I do not know, but I'm with you there. And I think West Virginia, just with Rich Rod coming off of a championship last year, or a championship game appearance last year in Conference USA, like, I think there's some familiarity there that maybe he can hit the ground running, but a bowl game for either of those teams feels highly unlikely.
How realistic do you think a bowl game is for Willie Fritz in Houston?
Yeah, I was surprised at the 6.5.
Yeah.
I mean, I sent off the Houston section 2 days ago. I have them at 6-6, and I thought that was a good year. To win 7 games, to win 8 games would be incredible. It's just hard to know. Like, you're betting on Willie Fritz if you're taking the over, because How can you know anything about this Cougars team? Like, 9 of their starters on offense are transfers, new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. Out of their starting 22, I would imagine 15 were transfers, 14 were transfers. So maybe there's a big hit. Like, I think Florida State's kind of the marker for transfer portal. Like, if it hits, you can go 13-0 and be a national championship contender. If it doesn't, you can be 2-10 and the worst team in FBS, right? And so I don't know if Houston's boom or bust is that big, but you're betting on Willie Fritz and just his ability to coach and put together a team if you're taking the over, because there's not a lot of knowns there, including Connor Wigman at quarterback, and if he can stay healthy, and if he becomes kind of what we thought he was as a recruit.
Paul and Craig, and Mike's going to be on. He's on with us, but this question for you. Among the ACC, there's a bunch of good quarterbacks. We've mentioned that in the Big 12. Eli Holstein, C.J. Briley, Kevin Jennings, Haynes King, Klubnik, and Kyron Drones. And there might be 1 or 2 others we're missing, but there was a graphic the ACC put up about coming back. 4 of the 6 are Texas homegrown in the ACC, with Jennings, King, Klubnik, and Drones. And these guys have some seasoning to them too, don't they, Mike?
Yeah, those are a lot of really good players. Haynes King's kind of like career arc has been awesome to watch. Become one of the more steady quarterbacks in the country. Same with Cade Klubnik. The reason I was at the Hall of Fame, and again, congratulations on the induction. This state has become a quarterback factory. The top pick in the NFL draft was a Texas high school guy. The 2 quarterbacks in the Super Bowl were Texas high school football players. I think 8 of the top 10 in total passing last year in college football were Texas high school football players. And so anytime you see these quarterback graphics, even at an ACC conference where there's only one Texas school, you just notice how many of these former gunslingers in Texas are. And I'd imagine that's Todd Dodge and Art Briles and Mike Leach and just the 7-on-7 influence. But something that's fascinating to watch. And every time you turn on the TV on Saturday or Sunday, you're seeing the quarterbacks that led teams to big wins on Friday night here in the state. And I think it's one of the more impressive things that we've been able to do as a state in the last 20 years is just become the home for quarterbacks in football, where quarterback is the king.
Last question from me, and I think us as well, is about the tug of war right now in the college football playoff, what it is with 12 again this year, it was last year, and eventually 16. Should the Big 12 just basically say, we're happy, give us our 2 automatic qualifiers and we'll shut up? Or would they, in your opinion, should they still kind of keep pushing for more?
Well, I mean, I'm married, right? Sometimes even if you're right, you have to take the best deal. And I feel like that's where the Big 12 is at. Like, they're right. Like, they should fight the power. Like, the SEC and the Big 10 are trying to monopolize this thing, bully everybody out of the way, and give some folks some scraps while they're starving, so they'll just be satisfied. It has like a very Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake vibe coming from them, right? But also, the negative or the downside of playing this game of Russian roulette is you hit the chamber with the bullet and they just leave you out completely. And how many times are there 2 Big 12 teams in the top 15? Like, it's not every single year. So I do think it's the best deal that they're going to get, but I also feel like they are morally in the right here. And I would also, compliment them on fighting the good fight and trying to stick up for the sport in a league where so many just look out for their self-interest. But I just don't think it's going to get any better for them. And if I was the Big 12, some kind of like concrete solution that allows me to be a part of this thing and have 2 teams guaranteed in it every single year, might be good enough just to kind of bite the bullet and take one on the chin.
Yeah, I Mike, and I say this all the time. The SEC and Big 10 are fighting against inevitable, like, things that will not happen that much. And so that's the thing I would push about, like, are you guys afraid of the 1 year every decade that this might not happen? Like, let's be real here. But I don't know if that argument really holds water when it comes to them, because sports are cyclical. And you could have a down year like the SEC did this year and didn't have 4 deserving teams to get in.
And I think they like the power and the ability to spread. Mm-hmm. And if they're guaranteed these amount of spots, then there's not any room for these other conferences to build up their depth to have 3 or 4 teams get in there, because there's no spot for them anyway. And so they can kind of chokehold and stranglehold the talent and convince, just like they have for a long time now, that if you want to play for championship, you have to come here. And that's why I celebrate the Texas Techs of the world who kill in the transfer portal and go spend money, or the Miami Hurricanes who just, money whipped an offensive tackle from Georgia to come down there. Like, NIL has some downsides, but the plus sides is it's putting some programs in position to compete at a level that they haven't been before. And it's spreading out the talent, because instead of being a backup at Alabama, you can go be the starter at Texas Tech and make some money in the process. And so I think the SEC and the Big 10 see that, and they're trying to counteract that by having a stranglehold on all the spots and the entry into the invitational that they're creating.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Love what you do. Appreciate your time. Mike Craven with us. Dave Campbell's Texas Football Magazine.